Cousins throws right to a Hawkeye. Tyler Sash lateraled the ball off to Micah Hyde. He might go. Inside the 5, lunging, touchdown.
Hey everybody, welcome into another Iowa Fan Perspective preview. Apologies for last week. I was traveling. I wasn't able to get the recap and preview in for the Illinois game. Turns out we didn't need one as Iowa beats Illinois. I know it was a little stressful. I know I was in Salt Lake City and stressed out to the max. Just there was no easy way around that one. I thought there'd be a way Iowa could find to maybe capitalize a couple more times within everything, and they did not. Made it as stressful as usual. So how about we jump into another stressful week, right? Iowa, Nebraska. This is hate week. This is one of 4 rivalry trophies that the Hawks play for. This is one that people kind of circle on the schedule with the border war, even though Wisconsin and Minnesota still border the state of Iowa, and then Iowa State's in the state. There's something different about Nebraska and what people think of them, and I think you could get Iowa State fans to agree with us on that, of all things. And you would have Nebraska fans say the same. I know Nebraska guy on our podcast, Parks here, has already dropped his preview, and he mentions the same thing. It's just there's something about the two states that just don't jive, and I'm completely fine with it because I feel very strongly about that group of fans in that program over there. But again, thank you for tuning into these on YouTube. I'd like to plug all of our socials. So we do our podcast. It'll be out Thursdays. We do everything that come out Thursday mornings in that regard. So previews for the upcoming week, all the games that are coming that weekend. We'll do a rivalry special this week, as well as just previewing some of the bigger games like your Civil War with Oregon State for the last time. And I don't know how they'll handle that one, as well as Ohio State, Michigan. So it should be a ton of fun, man. Follow us on X. They used to be Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as well. We do appreciate it. It's been a ton of fun doing all this all year, and we're going to continue it through bowl season, and we'll jump into some stuff next year as well as some predictions, and then just kind of going through each conference and each team because it's going to be a hell of a year, reminding on everybody how different 2024 is going to be. So appreciate that. Follow us on those platforms. It's going to be a ton of fun. Hey, let's talk about what this game sets up at. Iowa's punched their ticket to Indianapolis in the Big Ten title. That takes a load off of the shoulders of the Hawks, right? Like, you did not want to go into Lincoln thinking you needed to win in order to get there. I remember a couple years ago where they went into Lincoln needing to win and then needed a Wisconsin loss. They ended up getting both of those, punched their ticket to Indy. Well, this year we got it done the week before. So that's off, right? We don't have to worry about that. We're going in. We know what's happening next week. We need to win this week and deal with it there, right? You'd rather be a 10-2 with double-digit wins already than 9-3 with a winning 3 of your 4 trophies on the season. So Nebraska currently favored by 2.5. The over-under set at 26.5. You're never going to be surprised by another over-under in the history of Iowa football. It's just normal, right? People still want their clicks and likes on Twitter, but who cares, right? It is what it is. Nebraska fans are also used to it. Maybe not this low, but they've had totals low this year, the low 30s as well. High of 32, going to be a little bit chilly out there in Lincoln, slight winds and cloudy. When you look at just everything with this game, I think 2 years ago in Lincoln, it was pretty nice. Last year was decent weather as well. Well, we're keeping the snow away. We're keeping the rain away. It's just going to be a little chilly, cloudy. It's going to be feeling like winter. It's going to feel like Black Friday in that aspect, but it'll be a packed Lincoln with Iowa fans all over, even though it's not going into Memorial for the game, but should be a ton of fun, giving you kind of an outlook on what that'll look like. I'm no weatherman, but I did my research. All right. Previous games for both. Let's jump into last week. As you know, the Hawks walk away 15-13 victorious over Illinois after a late Caleb Johnson touchdown. That got interesting. You had a good first quarter. You kind of handled things well, and then you ran into a situation where you couldn't get Illinois off the field with Williams continuing to make plays on third down, and the run game was hitting. We were missing throws. We were not able to protect Deacon Hill. There's penalties that didn't make any sense. There were penalties that we earned. It was just the officiating was not great in that game. We've got to be honest with ourselves. It did not change the outcome by any means because both sides got screwed at certain times, but wow, there were some bad ones. That the roughing the passer to extend the Illinois drive light in that game was psychotic. I'd never seen anything like it. But hey, it's the world we live in, and that's how it worked. But Nebraska went up to Madison last week to play Wisconsin and lost in overtime after a 14-point first quarter lead. Nebraska loses, only putting up 17 on the board in overtime to the Badgers. That's a rough one. That's one that they've kind of grown accustomed to the last couple of years, maybe not under Rule, but definitely in the Frost era, blowing leads and losing games late and just kind of in shambles late games, right? That's kind of what they've become used to. And I'm hoping that's the same this weekend. I don't feel sorry for them. I'm sorry, I don't, but they've grown accustomed to it. But that is one that they definitely wish they had. They were coming into a little bit of a higher note. If you're an Iowa fan, you're kind of like, well, does it really motivate them? I don't think they need any more motivation for this week. Does it really kick them into a next gear because they lost that game a week ago? If they would have won it, are they coming in with a ton of confidence? I think you're getting the same team, right? Whether they won or lost that game last week, whether they were up 15 and won by 30, or they were up 14 and lost by 7 in overtime. I think you're getting the same team this week. So it'll be an interesting game. Now, before we go into just about Nebraska, if you're ready to watch this game on Black Friday, pay attention to just everything on the outside, right? Like how, if you're going to it, that is, if you're dealing with Nebraska fans, if you're dealing with Iowa fans, if you're kind of just doing your thing, don't be an asshole, right? Like everybody's going to yell at each other and chirp a little bit. But there's going to be some guy out there just yelling at you for no necessary reason, trying to pick a fight, thinks he's cool. It's just going to be some drunk college kid or some drunk a-hole. It's like 35 years older than you. Just don't fall for it, right? Be smart, even if you got some booze in you, because you're going to need it. Both fans alike, you're going to need a couple shots. You think you're getting through this game with a couple Tums and some aspirin? Think again, buddy. Take another shot of Fireball, right? So it should be a great weekend. But yeah, don't be an asshole. Like rivalries are fun until somebody gets hit in the mouth. It's a fact, right? Look that one up. I'm pretty sure it's in the How to Be a Good Person dictionary. Let's jump into about Nebraska and Matt Rule. I don't know how much people have watched Nebraska this year. I've watched quite a bit just because one of the guys on our podcast being a Nebraska guy, and I feel like I got to be up to date to kind of go through conversation with him for podcast reasons, and as well as poking fun at the Bear, right? You just kind of want to pay attention to, you keep your friends close, your enemies closer. It's kind of where we are on that whole thing. Chubba Purdy will be the starter this week. It seems like even though Harburg's back, they'll keep Purdy. Purdy wasn't bad last week, but it's the third quarterback they've played this year. Went to Jeff Sims. He was pretty brutal through the first couple games. Brought in Harburg. He was all right at best. He goes down with an injury. They're bringing Chubba Purdy, Florida State transfer. And has been, again, all right. They don't have a stud quarterback that's really a scare, like you're thinking of the Smothers kid a couple years ago. Martinez was probably their best they've had in a while, and they just hated the shit out of him because he had turnover problems. But in reality, they weren't a very good football team. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle this, right? With him at the helm, he's getting his first start in this rivalry. He's played in big games, though. He was in Madison last week on the road. I'm sure that was a good thing. But he's had time to play football anyway. It's not like he's getting his first career start or his first snaps at quarterback at the Division I level. But he does bring a good run threat to this offense, right? He kind of like Harburg has the ability to move around in an option attack to get him out of the pocket and move and pick up first downs if he needs to with his feet. But when you look at like Anthony Grant, Emmett Johnson, those are two backs they really like. The Grant kid's really solid. I've been a fan of his since he went to Lincoln. And the Emmett Johnson kid is a good freshman that they picked up, I believe, from Minneapolis, and has been super good for them. Kind of going back right into Emmett Johnson. Sorry for the little delay there. Had to make sure the dog wasn't going to eat a sock here. Just crazy stuff. The problem with the Nebraska offense is there's a couple things a lot like the Iowa offense. They're going to try to run the football. It's kind of what they rely on. They are a little more efficient in yards per play and yards per rush in that aspect in the Iowa offense. I think a lot of that has to do with the scheme, right? I just think they try to open it up a little bit more on the edges. They don't go downhill through zone blocking schemes to like an Iowa team does that can be a little more predictable. They are a little more wide open in that aspect. But Iowa, when you looked last week, like Illinois found success running the football after they had hit a couple big plays or they hit a couple receivers that can make plays. Here's the difference between that Illinois offense and this Nebraska offense, right? One has Isaiah Williams, the other one doesn't. So Billy Kemp's going to be the main guy for Nebraska. He's a speedster. He's a solid receiver. He's not going to blow you away by any means, but he's not an Isaiah Williams like I had talked about earlier. The kid is a stud. That's an All-American type receiver at Illinois. The Kemp kid's not that, so that'll help out. It also was the first week without DeJean. I think that just took some growing pains to see how they were going to play that. Deshaun Lee got a lot of snaps out there on the kid. Jamari Harris, like they're just going to rotate kids in and out. And the Iowa defense, they're going to play soft in coverage. They'll play 8-9 yards deep, even on a 3rd and 5, making sure they don't get beat and give up the big plays. If you think last year when Nebraska beat us in Kinnick, it was big plays that were the problem. And they're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen this time. Phil Parker's very good at that. Last week, also the difference, Illinois was able to pick up on the Iowa blitzes and capitalize on them, almost like switch them against Iowa, dump these things right back to where the blitz came from, whether that was over the middle when Higgins came, or if we brought someone from the edge, right? It was just picking apart that way. I'm not sure if I'd trust the Purdy kid as much to do that. But I mean, we got to pay attention to Kemp, right? Like it's a possibility that he hits a couple, but I think they'll plan a lot more on trying to rush to the edges and get the ball out to playmakers on the edges rather than try to go north and south on this Iowa defense. When you look at the defense on the Nebraska team, man, they're good. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not just going to say that's because they play a Big Ten West schedule like Iowa. Like, I don't think we'd say about Iowa's defense that. Like, we'll say that against anybody. 15th in the country in yards per game, 10th in the country in yards per play. So, yeah, you're not going to hit a lot of big ones on them. They're not going to just stifle you at the point of attack every single time, but they have been very good at making sure teams get off the field and aren't sustained drives and putting up big numbers and points, right? 31 total sacks for this team. That's pretty darn good. That's a lot. And Jamari Butler and Luke Reimer are the main catalyst of that. 5.5 for Butler, 5 for Reimer. Two guys at the linebacker position to really pay attention to. And Iowa has been better, like at times throughout the year at pass pro. I don't think last week was their best effort. This front's good. They don't have Newton in the middle. That's going to be a first-round draft pick, but they do have talent on the edges. So something to pay attention to with the Iowa offensive line. Make sure you can keep Deacon Hill upright. He can't move around that well. We saw the one scramble last week. That was, I don't know what that was. That was a blessing from there. Kid got out of the pocket and had literally nobody in front of him. So don't expect that this week. This is a lot more of an athletic offensive or defensive line. Isaac Gifford at linebacker, 75 total tackles. Their leading tackler by a mile. This is the stud of the defense. This is a guy to pay attention to. This is the one that we need to have circled on the boards. Make sure we get him blocked if we get to the second level in the run scheme. Because when we were starting to hit things last week against Illinois, I'm thinking of when we were starting to hit things against teams like Rutgers and others, up to the second level, blocking their best players on the defense at the linebacker level. So that's what we need to plan on. Secondary wise, they're not as talented as they have been in the past. I think some of the bad Nebraska teams had better secondaries. I'm not saying like this is like leaps and bounds worse. Like they're all kind of around the same area, but I wasn't too impressed with this group. The problem is can Iowa take advantage of it? I'm not sure, but Deacon Hill did have a couple good ones last week on third down to convert and sustain drives. I think with Caleb Brown getting more and more involved, I think with Seth Anderson being able to be a little bit more of that deep threat we needed, Estrengo settling in, and Nico's great underneath on routes. I do think we can find time in the play action passing game to really take advantage of that. I'm not saying we're going to hit a 65-yard bomb for 6, but I could see a couple 20-plus yarders because if we can get the run game established or at least respected, we can hit one over the top on this secondary. So that'll be super fun to pay attention to. If Iowa can hit a couple, man, I really like their chances. I'm just realizing I didn't have the ticker going for you guys. I apologize. There's that for you. But it is something to pay attention to with this Nebraska team. Is it's kind of copy and paste to Iowa. I think you'd give Iowa the edge on special teams. I think you'd give them the edge on I was going to say like inability to beat yourselves and penalties and things like that. I think you'd look at Iowa and say that they are not a team that's going to beat themselves penalty wise. They're not going to turn it over. But that hasn't been a problem for Iowa this year, right? Like the last game against Illinois, there's penalties on the defense that really hurt us against the offense. Also, when you look at strip sacks that Deacon Hill has given up, there's been a couple bad picks that made no sense. He's been 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His line right now, not great, Bob. Like that's something to pay attention to. And is Nebraska able to beat itself or Nebraska again? Yes, but Matt Rule's a better coach than what Scott Frost was. I don't think they are as prone to it as we've seen in the past. So something to pay attention to. But can Iowa force more Nebraska mistakes, right? Can you make sure that Iowa is the one that's benefiting from all the negative plays and turnovers and field position and stuff like that? Because that's basically what it's going to come down to. Just a little about Iowa before I get into my prediction, right? Deacon Hill, we're going to need another solid game out of him. I think we all know it's kind of a situation where we want to get to the offseason and see what we can open up this quarterback competition to and see if he is really truly the guy or if he's the guy just because Ferentz isn't confident in Labus or Linus. Like, I think we just need to pay attention to that, but we just don't turn the ball over, right? Against this front, we can't have the ball tucked at our belt. We can't get ripped in the pocket. We cannot turn it over. We just can't give extra possessions to a really bad Nebraska offense. Because if we limit their possessions, how many times do you really think they're going to go down and score, right? They could say the same about us. Caleb Johnson on LaShawn. Hey, let's get rolling on the run game a little more. I think Caleb's been getting more and more confident. LaShawn's still getting the bulk of the carries, it feels like. LaShawn hasn't had the big jump out and go run that we've seen. Like, he'll get you your, 8 here, 9 here, or maybe a 4 or 5 a couple of times, but he's not busting the 15, 20-plus ones that we'd like to see. Caleb feels like he's been that guy the last couple of weeks. So let's get running on those guys. Let's make sure the two workhorses are getting a lot of run. I think Jazz is good. I think he's really talented. I think sometimes he runs so hard he misses where the hole is, and he can take a one cut and grab another 5 or 6. But he runs with his head down a little more than I would like to see. But again, I'm not a coach. I'm not a running back whisperer. I think he's being coached up well, but still a young kid, and he does run hard, and I'm really excited for his future. Caleb Brown's going to be a big piece of this. Can you continue to find ways to get him into the offense where he's in space, he's able to make plays? Maybe you push the ball downfield a little bit more. And then off of that, maybe a string underneath, and we saw him score last week, becomes more and more open as the time goes. I think that would be completely the recipe for Iowa to open up the pass game, and not necessarily that we're going to just spread it out, obviously, and sling it all over the yard, but we have a leveled passing scheme where we have a deep thread. We can hit the middle, then we have Raghini underneath. I think if we can get a string a little more comfortable and it becomes that check down option at 5 or 6 rather than the check down option to a running back in the flat, I think we're in good shape there, right? Offensive line. We got to establish the run. We've got to be good against this really talented Nebraska front. We've got to be able to block and pass pro. Simple as that. I think they've been harped on that all week in the facilities, and they know that. So that's something to pay attention to. Watch the trenches. Between these two, I think Iowa's defensive line will have the chance to really harm what Nebraska is trying to do. But on the flip side, Iowa's offensive line is way less talented, I think, than what Nebraska's defensive line brings to the table. Hey, and special teams, right? We've blocked a punt. Last time we were in Lincoln and took it back for 6. Well, last week we missed another field goal, had a PAT blocked. That stuff can't happen when you barely score points. So we've got to tighten that up a little bit. Torrey Taylor's going to be a big thing. If we can make them consistently drive 75, 80 yards to score touchdowns, yeah, I really like our chances. So going into a prediction here, here's what I have. I think for a lot of reasons here, and this has something baked in. This will go over the number, by the way, not on intention, but I think there's a way Iowa gets a cheap one, right? I'm not saying a block punt for a touchdown again. I'm saying maybe there's a pick 6. Maybe there's a pick that gets down to the 5, gives Iowa an extra position inside the 10. They punch one in there, grab a field goal somewhere, and then maybe one of the first half drives punches you in for 6 or 7. There's your 17, Nebraska, right? I think 2 field goals is perfectly respectable. I think you get into a point where maybe they get good field position, get 3 out of it, late touchdown somewhere, then another field goal. I just don't have the confidence that they're going to walk down the field consistently to get 2 scores. But anything's possible, right? If Deacon Hill turns the ball over, we're in trouble. If they're throwing interceptions to us, they get in trouble. So this is very touchy. When you get it feels like you can be like, oh, well, you know what I should do is just like take $5 or $15, $20, bet it $5 on 5 different perfect scores, hit it right in the nose. Well, it's not that easy, right? So I'll take Iowa 17-13. We'll be the Big Ten West champs with 10 wins, even though the year's been turbulent, and we'll go right into Indianapolis with a chance to win the Big Ten. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you again. We'll see you on the other side. Go Hawks.